I never imagined that the end of my marriage would arrive so quietly. No arguments, no dramatic blow-ups, just an eerie, stretching silence that grew between us like a widening fault line. Oddly enough, the clues had been there all along. Looking back, I should have recognized them. She spent more and more time on her phone, lingered longer in front of the mirror before heading out, and laughed too hard at messages I was never supposed to notice. Still, I chose to ignore those things. Or perhaps I had convinced myself that this was simply part of married life, just a rough phase we were bound to face. Then came the night of the party. It wasn't supposed to be anything major, just a laid-back gathering at an upscale rooftop bar downtown. I only learned about it in passing, mentioned casually by Mallory as she was getting dressed one evening. She stood at the mirror, adjusting an earring, and said, "I'm heading out for a bit." I looked up from the couch. "Out where?" I asked. "Just a party," she answered lightly, smoothing out her dress. "A work friend invited me." Something about her tone triggered a gut reaction. "Which friend?" I questioned. She paused for just a beat, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "You wouldn't know them," she finally said, brushing off the question while grabbing her purse. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. "Mallory, I don't think this is a great idea," I said, getting to my feet. "A party on a Tuesday? That's not really your style." She offered a quick, dismissive smile. "It's only a few drinks. Nothing wild. Don't wait up." And just like that, she walked out the door. I should have asked more. Pressed further. Stopped her, even. But I didn't. I stayed on the couch, staring at the door long after it had closed behind her, a knot forming in my gut that told me this wasn't just some casual night out. It felt like something else, something more serious. I told myself I wouldn't sit there all night, wouldn't be the kind of husband who waited around, checking the time obsessively, letting doubt and suspicion take over. But despite all that, I became exactly that man. The television played in the background, though I couldn't focus on a single word. My phone stayed in my hand, untouched, as I kept glancing at the clock. Midnight came and went. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. Still no word from Mallory. I wanted to believe she was simply caught up chatting, that maybe her phone had died. But somewhere inside me, the part that had ignored warning signs for too long, understood the truth. Something wasn't right. Even though I knew I shouldn't, I picked up my phone and called her. It rang over and over, but she didn't pick up. I sent a message. "Hey, it's really late. Are you okay?" It went through, but she didn't read it. No reply came. That creeping sense of dread shifted into something heavier. My throat tightened, and my hands trembled slightly as I set my phone down. I remembered where the party was. She had mentioned the location offhandedly a few days earlier during a phone call with a coworker, unaware that I was listening. It was one of those trendy downtown rooftops, the kind of place she used to say we'd outgrown as a couple. Yet here she was, out past 2 in the morning, exactly where she claimed we didn't belong anymore. I tried to quiet the storm in my head, to tell myself she was just enjoying herself. But deep down, I understood the truth. No husband should have to sit in the dark convincing himself that everything is fine this late at night. When I grabbed my car keys, I sensed that something vital had already slipped away. Maybe the marriage wasn't entirely over yet, but the sense of stability I'd clung to was gone. The idea that I still had a handle on the situation vanished. As I drove through the city's empty streets, the silence outside mirrored the one inside me. Here and there, small groups stumbled out of bars, laughing, totally unaware that someone like me was gripping the steering wheel so tightly it turned his knuckles pale. Once I arrived at the rooftop bar, I didn't go in immediately. I remained parked nearby, gazing up at the soft glow of the rooftop lights. I watched a few people trickle out, arms around each other, laughter barely audible over the beat of music flowing from inside. And then I saw her, Mallory. She wasn't alone. I had no idea what I thought I might witness. Maybe some innocent reason to quiet the storm in my chest, a simple explanation that would let me breathe again and return home without feeling like the life I had built was collapsing around me. But deep in my heart, I already knew I wouldn't find that. I parked a block away from the rooftop bar, sitting in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The neon lights of the city blurred through the windshield, and I could hear the faint bass of music thumping in the distance. My phone rested screen up on the passenger seat, still void of any messages from Mallory. Drawing in a steadying breath, I opened the car door and stepped out. The elevator ride to the rooftop felt agonizingly slow, every floor marked by a soft chime that only seemed to amplify the tension thrumming through me. When the doors finally parted, I was immediately greeted by a potent blend of expensive cologne, alcohol, and something else, a kind of static in the air, the buzz of people who had crossed the line between control and carelessness. Stepping onto the rooftop, my eyes swept over the crowd. Twinkling string lights crisscrossed above, casting a golden haze over the scene, people swaying to music, laughing too loudly, leaning into each other in ways that twisted my insides. A DJ bobbed along to the rhythm in the far corner while servers maneuvered through the clusters of guests, their trays burdened with melting drinks. And then I spotted her. Mallory stood by the bar, a drink casually held in her hand. Her posture leaned subtly toward a man I didn't know, tall, sharply dressed, exuding a self-assuredness that made him stand out. He was far too close to her, the kind of closeness that went beyond innocent conversation. I should have left right then. Should have turned around before I witnessed something that would stay with me forever. But I didn't. I stayed rooted, watching from a distance. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head in that familiar way she used to when we were just starting out, when everything between us still felt new and unexplored. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need sound. Everything was in her body language, in the gentle, thoughtless touch on his arm, the comfort in her stance. Something inside me fractured. Without thinking, I moved toward her, each step heavier than the last, my heart thudding so loudly it drowned out the music. I said her name, not as a greeting, but like a warning. She turned, and in that split second, I saw it, guilt flickering in her eyes just long enough to confirm what I feared. Her expression shifted quickly as she caught her breath. "Amos," she said, startled. The man beside her barely flinched, sipping his drink as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. That nonchalance stung more than it should have. Mallory straightened and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice overly composed. I responded with a calmness I didn't feel. "The real question is, what are you doing here?" She hesitated, eyes darting like she was searching for the right lie. And then it came too fast, too rehearsed. "It's just a work thing," she said, gripping her glass a little too tightly. "I told you about it." I let out a humorless laugh and shook my head. "No, you didn't." Silence thickened between us. Finally, the man next to her spoke up, setting his drink down. "Hey man, maybe you should take a second and breathe." "Don't," I snapped, turning my gaze on him. "Don't speak to me." He raised his hands in mock surrender, but there was a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth that only fueled the fire inside me. Mallory reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. I had seen more than enough. "I'll see you at home," I said, turning sharply and walking away before emotions could override my judgment. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her lie or the fact that she no longer seemed to care about hiding it. The drive back was spent in absolute silence. No music played. The radio stayed off. All I could hear was the soft hum of the engine and the relentless pounding of my heart. My fingers clamped the steering wheel so hard they throbbed, but I refused to let go. I didn't trust what would happen if I did. Maybe I'd break down. Maybe I'd have to face what I had just witnessed. But I wasn't ready to face it. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that the way she touched his arm and smiled at him meant nothing. Still, deep in my gut, I knew better. I'd been with Mallory for too many years not to recognize the signs, every twitch, every subtle lie disguised as truth. And that look she gave me tonight? That wasn't just guilt. It was fear. I pulled into the driveway and stayed seated in the car, staring at the quiet house. It no longer felt like a home. Something fundamental had shifted, like the walls weren't shelter anymore, just wood and nails holding up the illusion of stability. This place, where we had built our life together, now felt hollow. When I finally stepped inside, silence engulfed me. I flicked on a light, but it barely made a dent in the heaviness that had settled around me. I didn't bother changing clothes. I dropped onto the couch, leaned forward, and locked my eyes on the floor, my elbows braced on my knees. I waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, her arrival, an explanation, some kind of sign that I'd misunderstood everything. But none of it came. 1 hour passed. Then another. My phone stayed still and quiet. No calls. No messages. My wife was somewhere out there, but she clearly wasn't thinking about me. She wasn't troubled by what I had seen or how it felt to be left alone in a silent house, fully aware that something fundamental between us had shifted for good. That's when it hit me, she genuinely didn't care. That realization landed with more force than anything else. It wasn't the party. It wasn't the man she had been with. Not even the bold-faced lie she had told. What hurt most was how little any of it seemed to matter to her. The quiet was finally broken when the front door clicked open. It was nearly 3 in the morning. I stayed where I was, motionless, my gaze fixed on the floor. I listened as she placed her keys on the counter, slipped off her heels, and walked across the room like it was just another ordinary night. Then she spotted me. "Amos," she said softly, almost uncertain. I released a long breath. I still downcast. "You're back pretty late." There was a pause, followed by a weak laugh. "I told you, it was just a party." I finally looked up, locking eyes with her. "Was it, though?" Something flickered across her face, something too quick to name. Then it vanished. "You're turning this into more than it is," she said with a dismissive tone. I studied her closely. Her makeup was flawless, her hair untouched, but her eyes, they didn't match. They felt distant, removed. "You weren't honest with me," I said evenly. Mallory sighed and sank into the chair across from me. "Amos, I didn't lie." A dry laugh almost escaped me. "You told me it was related to work." "It was," she replied. I slowly shook my head. "No, it really wasn't." Her jaw clenched, ever so slightly. "Okay, fine. Maybe it wasn't officially work-related, but it wasn't anything major either. I just needed a break." "With him," I added. The words seemed to strike her. She flinched. I let the silence stretch between us. She avoided my eyes, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She knew she had been caught. Eventually, she crossed her arms and sighed again. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Amos." I leaned back, my stomach tight with unease. "I want the truth." She hesitated, biting her lower lip. For a moment, I thought she might actually open up. But then she stood, brushing down her dress as if shaking the conversation off. "I'm too tired for this. I'm going to bed." And with that, it was over. She disappeared down the hall, leaving me alone in the soft glow of the lamp, thoughts spinning faster than I could contain them. This wasn't about one poor decision. This wasn't the kind of situation a sorry or some explanation could fix. This was the exact moment I understood that my marriage was already over. She simply hadn't bothered to tell me. The following morning felt surreal, like waking up in a parallel world where everything looked the same, but something vital inside me had shifted. Mallory moved about the house with practiced ease, humming quietly as she brewed coffee, her attention fixed on her phone like nothing had happened the night before. Her casual attitude made my stomach twist into knots. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, silently watching her. My mind kept circling back to the moment she walked in, the way she had ended the conversation before it even started, choosing to ignore rather than be honest. She finally glanced up and spotted me. "Morning," she said, her tone light, as if it was just another ordinary day. I didn't reply immediately. I studied her, searching for a glimpse of the woman I had once known, the one I had married. She held herself the same way, but something had changed. Her eyes hesitated for just a second too long before meeting mine. "Are we going to talk about what happened last night?" I asked. She let out an exasperated sigh and set her phone down. "Amos, what is there even to say?" I clenched my jaw. "You didn't come home until 3 in the morning. You lied about where you were. Lied about who you were with. And then, when I tried to talk to you, you made it seem like I was the one causing the problem." Her lips pressed into a thin, firm line. "I didn't lie." "Mallory," I interrupted, my voice low and steady. "Please don't do this." There was a flash in her eyes, maybe irritation, maybe regret, but she quickly buried it under a bitter little laugh. "You're being dramatic." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "No, I'm finally reacting the way I should have reacted months ago." She scoffed and turned her attention back to the coffee pot like I was just another inconvenience she had to get through before starting her day. Something inside me hardened in that moment. She didn't care. I had spent all night wrestling with the weight of what this meant for us, trying to figure out what came next. But she had simply gone to bed and left it behind. There was no hint of remorse in her voice, no sign of concern in her eyes. She had made her decision. I was the one who had refused to accept it. I grabbed my keys from the counter and turned to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, barely glancing up. I paused for a second in the doorway. "I'm not sure." And then I stepped out, leaving her behind with her coffee and the secrets she clearly wasn't ready to share. I drove without direction, letting the early light stretch across the quiet streets as the city slowly woke up. My thoughts spiraled endlessly, cycling through every exchange we'd had over the past year. I was trying to pinpoint the exact moment I lost her. Was it a slow fade? Or did she simply wake up one morning and decide I no longer fit into the life she envisioned? At some point, I ended up outside a time-worn diner, one of those places with cracked red booths and the ever-present aroma of coffee lingering in the air. I ordered something I didn't actually want and sat there, barely acknowledging the untouched food in front of me while the background hum of strangers filled the space. Laughter, conversation, life moving on all around me. How many of these people were sitting across from someone who had already emotionally walked away from their relationship? I lost track of how long I had been sitting there when my phone vibrated. A message from Mallory. Just 2 words. Come home. It wasn't an apology. There was no invitation to talk. Just a directive. A call to return. I stared at the message, my grip on the phone tightening. And that's when it hit me, I didn't want to go back. Not to the silence. Not to the deception. Not to a home that no longer felt like mine, shared with someone who had clearly chosen her position in our fractured marriage. I placed the phone on the table and watched the screen go dark, the message disappearing into the void. For the first time since everything began unraveling, I seriously considered the idea of not returning. I lingered in that diner, cradling a coffee that had long turned cold, observing people come and go. Life continued as if the foundation of mine hadn't just cracked beneath me. The truth was simple. I wasn't ready to return. Maybe I never would be. But eventually, I did. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already slipping behind the trees, casting elongated shadows across the lawn. I shut off the engine and sat still for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, bracing myself for whatever version of Mallory I was about to encounter. Would she meet me with anger? Regret? Indifference? I inhaled deeply, then stepped out of the car. Inside, the house was unnaturally still. No low murmur of a television, no distant melody playing from the kitchen. Just silence. The atmosphere felt heavier than before, like the house itself had absorbed the weight of the night's tension and now pressed it back onto me. Then I saw her. She was curled up on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, her eyes fixed on her phone. When I stepped inside, she looked up, her expression unreadable. You didn't respond to my message, she said, her voice level. I shut the door behind me, leaning against it. I saw it. She set her phone aside and rubbed her temple. So where were you? A short, mirthless laugh escaped me. That's interesting. I was planning to ask you the same thing last night. Her jaw tightened, but for once, she didn't come back with an excuse. That was unusual. Normally, she'd spin some partial truth meant to shift the blame or confuse the issue. But now, she just looked at me, as if waiting for something. I walked past her into the kitchen and opened the cupboard to grab a glass. I wasn't thirsty, I just needed a distraction, something to keep my hands busy. I could feel her eyes on me the entire time, the weight of her attention pressing against me. Are we really doing this? She asked finally. I turned, glass in hand. Doing what? This, she said, motioning between the two of us. Pretending something's wrong when nothing even happened. Something in me cracked. Nothing happened? I repeated, my tone calm, but edged with disbelief. She sighed, rising to her feet. Amos, No. I raised a hand to stop her. Please don't insult me like that. Don't stand there and try to rewrite what I saw. We both know the truth, so let's not pretend. She crossed her arms, retreating into a defensive stance. I didn't cheat on you. I let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the stillness of the house. Maybe not physically. Yet. But emotionally? You've been gone for a while now, Mallory. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, I thought she'd try to deny it. But instead, she looked away, clutching the hem of her sweater in silence. That pause, that quiet admission, told me everything I needed to know. Running a hand down my face, I felt the fatigue settle deep into my bones. How long? I asked. She blinked. How long what? I gestured vaguely, the words escaping with a sigh. How long have you been like this? Half present, half somewhere else? Because I can tell this isn't new. Last night wasn't some isolated mistake. She swallowed hard, but gave no reply. That, too, was a kind of answer. I exhaled slowly, my chest growing tighter. Why didn't you just tell me? That question seemed to catch her off guard. Her brow creased in confusion. Tell you what? That you don't love me anymore. The sentence landed between us like a weight, heavy and sharp. She opened her mouth, then hesitated and closed it again. And in that moment, I finally saw it, the truth she hadn't dared to speak aloud. I placed the glass down and nodded, slowly connecting the last of the scattered dots that had once made up our life. Right. Amos, she began, but I shook my head. I'm not looking for an apology, Mallory. I don't even need you to explain. I held her gaze, feeling strangely composed while everything inside me was unraveling. I just need to understand if there's still a reason to keep fighting. Her silence answered me more clearly than words ever could. I stood motionless, watching Mallory, hoping she might say something, anything, that would prove me wrong. Something to show there was still something left between us, something worth saving. But she just stared back, Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't summon the words. The silence wrapped around us, thick and heavy. Throughout our marriage, I had always been the one trying to mend what broke. During arguments, I was the one who reached out to reconcile. When she pulled away, I chased after her, thinking that was just the rhythm of love, one person always caring more, holding on tighter. But right there, in our kitchen, a realization hit me so hard it nearly knocked the air from my lungs. I was the only one still holding on. Mallory had already let go. With a quick, frustrated breath, she turned away, placing her hands on the counter like she needed something to ground her. "I don't know what you want me to say, Amos." A dry, humorless chuckle slipped out of me. "Funny thing is, I'm not sure anymore either." She ran a hand through her hair, shaking her head. "You're turning this into more than it is. Last night was nothing." My jaw tightened. Then why does it feel like everything changed? Her silence in response said more than any defense could. That was all I needed to hear. Rubbing the back of my neck, I felt an eerie numbness settling in. These past few days, no, months, I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, said the right things, showed enough love, I could fix what was broken. But you can't repair something that's shattered beyond recognition. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Mallory, do you even want to stay married?" She turned slowly, arms wrapped around herself. "Of course, I do. Too fast. Too practiced. Too hollow." I gave a slow nod, letting her words fall like dust between us. "Right. Amos, don't do this," she pleaded. "Do what?" I asked, tilting my head. "Pretend like you're the villain?" I let out a bitter laugh that held no amusement. "You're not a villain, Mallory. But you're not really my wife anymore either." Her face flinched, a subtle twitch of pain at the truth she didn't want to admit. I pushed away from the counter, fatigue dragging at my limbs. "I need some air." I didn't wait for a reply. Grabbing my jacket, I stepped into the crisp night, the city's distant lights making the stars nearly invisible. I inhaled deeply, trying to settle my thoughts, but the questions kept swirling. How had we gotten here? How did we go from midnight conversations and shared laughter to this emptiness? A shell of a marriage built on silence and evasions? Leaning against the porch railing, I stared at the deserted street. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had no idea what to do next. Because this wasn't just about last night. This was about every moment that came before it, and every quiet wound we'd ignored. And now, I couldn't see a way back. I stood there a long time, letting the cold nip at my skin, my breath rising in slow, foggy wisps. The quiet felt oddly comforting, so different from the noise in my head. I had held on for so long, convinced that if I just gave enough time, love, effort, Mallory would eventually meet me halfway, that she'd look at me again the way she used to. But I had been fighting this battle alone. And now, I was just tired. I didn't know how long I stood in the cold, but eventually, I heard the door creak open behind me. Soft light spilled out onto the porch, and I felt her presence even before she spoke. "Amos," she said, her voice low, hesitant. I didn't turn to face her right away. Instead, I let her words hang there between us. For once, I didn't feel the urge to fix everything. I didn't need explanations, apologies, or promises of change. I just felt finished. When I finally turned, Mallory stood there looking uncertain, unsure of what to say or how to reach me. But I wasn't waiting for her to. I was looking for something else now, freedom. "I think we both know this isn't working," I said, my tone calm and even. Her face faltered. "Amos, I gently shook my head, stopping her before she could continue. "It's okay." And for the first time, I truly meant those words. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and though it looked like she wanted to argue, she didn't. Instead, she nodded, as if finally acknowledging what had been true for a long time. A deep breath escaped me, and with it came a release of fear, of tension, of everything I had been holding on to. I had dreaded this moment, terrified of what letting go would mean. But looking at her now, I understood something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was simply the beginning of something new. I stepped back toward the house, not out of defeat or bitterness, but because the time had come. And as I crossed the threshold, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. Maybe even longer. There are moments when true courage lies in choosing to walk away. And for the first time in what felt like ages, I finally felt prepared to do just that.